Yeah, our Google Calendar was off. I was supposed to wear this today, but Steve thought it was his day.
Well, we just need more than one color of sweatshirt.
And Alex actually didn't know this, but CS stands for Charlie Steve. So sorry, bud.
All right, let's look at the questions today. Let's see. Okay, first thing is this one is from Kelsey. Our gym is set to open again in June. What's the best way to train at home to be ready and to not be injured when I go back to the gym? And I at first I saw that question and I was like, oh, this is crazy. This is, like, why would you not just be ready? But it's a legitimate thing, because when we do get back to the gym, when we go to training 3 hours a day versus our 25 minutes of hangboarding, the capacity is substantially different. And so what the steps you need to go through between now and when your gym opens are to try to get to the duration that your normal training sessions will be, and then the frequency of those sessions. And so if I do 3 2-hour sessions a week, that's 6 total hours of training. You need to work back up to 6 hours of training in any respect. It can be riding your mountain bike. It can be doing push-ups on the living room floor. It can be any number of things. But you want to get up to that number of hours, and then you want to be able to start increasing that level of movement and intensity. And so things like body weight circuits, some sprints, things that get your heart rate to go up and down, and to use different muscle groups and do some core stuff. Those kinds of things are going to help get you in line for it. You don't need to start ramping up the hangboarding like crazy. Just stay with your normal pace, and see if you can just start to simulate those weeks as things start to progress. And then I would say now's a good time to start. You should go, a third of the way there this week, another third of the way there the following week, up to full speed the last week of the month, and then you are going to be, up to your 6 hours or your 7 or 8 hours, whatever your time is, by the time the gym's open again.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really hard for folks. It's going to be almost 2 months, sometimes maybe even 2.5 or 3 months for some of you. It's not going to be like leaving the gym, March 15th, March 20th. We're well into May now. So sound advice there, taking it nice and slow. Let's see. I wanted to just kind of get to this question that Ted asked, and thanks for reaching out, Ted. Hey, Steve and crew, question for the show today. Wondering if you all have worked with any climbers who have positive ulnar variants. And truth be told, I had to Google this. I didn't know what it was. It's where I believe it's the ulna, this guy right here, is a little bit longer than the radius. And he'd like to know what outcomes of the surgery and how it has affected the climbing. I'm in my mid-40s, and it might be considering surgery at some point later in life. Not really excited about giving up climbing. I haven't worked with anyone, and none of us have here at Climb Strong. It's definitely beyond our scope. It sounds like it's something that's pretty serious and something you obviously looked really into. I would try, if at all possible, like talk to a physical therapist or folks in that field that also understand what you'd like to get back to, which is climbing, before jumping into some sort of like irreversible surgery or something. Like, again, I can't speak to what's going to happen, but I think if you get on the phone with a Dr. Tyler Nelson or Dr. Jared Vagey, they're gonna know what this is and kind of what some outcomes are. They've probably even worked with patients like that, or maybe even been through some like peer-reviewed articles. But I think talking to them and thinking realistically what climbing is going to look like for you in the future is important, instead of, not to badmouth any other person who's an expert in this field, but we want someone to give you information that understands the sport of climbing and what you want to come back to. So yeah, that sounds tough, and we wish you all the best, but I don't have anything other than giving you info on that.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. I remember when I first started into exercise science and learning about injuries and whatever else. We were tickled to be considered experts, and we wanted to give all kinds of advice, and like, oh, I need to lose weight, I need to do this and whatever else, and so much is outside of scope of practice for a climbing coach. But just because we've been to a conference or been to some sort of educational thing that addresses these things, we're getting a lot more conservative about giving specific recommendations on these things anymore, because it's real easy to give people bad advice. So I'm going to toss this one to you, Charlie, because this is a good one. But Brian writes, from a completely strength perspective, does it matter if you wait 5 minutes versus 15 minutes between sets of strength exercises? At what point is resting too long not beneficial anymore, just for the sake of completing all the sets, if ever?
Did you say you were pushing that to me?
Yeah, I want you to answer it.
I'm reading hard. I appreciate that you read that to me. You read it way better than I would have. So, Brian, this is a really good question. I think so. Generally speaking, if like you said, if we're talking about pure strength, the rest intervals between exercises and between sets is way, way bigger than people would expect or are willing to wait. I would say 3 minutes is the absolute minimum if we're really truly working on, say 85 to 100% of your max, if it's like a test day or it's like a heavy training cycle. Up to the 5 or maybe even 15 minutes seems a little bit long for me, but for some people it might be something you need to do depending on how big the workout is or how intense it is. But yeah, 3 to 5 minutes is pretty much what everyone agrees on in that range for what you should be able to do and rest for a really good effort each and every set and rep for whatever protocol or program that you're doing. I would say that can start to feel a little unrealistic in everyday life in regular training. So if it's just like, a regular strength cycle and you're not maybe tapping up into your max, I think you can kind of like just see what feels right for you. If at any time you feel like your set is worse than the last, in the sense that like, I usually should be able to do this, you should look at your rest interval. If it feels harder, that's just strength training. That's just kind of how it goes. As you progress your exercises and then into your training, deeper into your training. But I think having an interval at first, or like having a stopwatch that actually like shows you what 3 minutes feels like or 5 minutes feels like, then you can slowly start to play in like just being in tune with how much rest you need. And like we do in our integrated strength protocols or programs rather, is like having some mobility or having some other exercise that isn't the thing that you're working on, that keeps your mind away from it for a little bit. It keeps you rested. Go get a drink of water. That's usually about 3 minutes before it's time to press something really heavy or lift something really heavy or hang on your fingers with something heavy. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, it does absolutely matter, those rest intervals. 3 minutes at the minimum, 5 minutes is probably, I wouldn't say max, but a pretty conservative number. But I do think the like realistic everyday athlete training in the gym doesn't need to like have a stopwatch for every 3 or 5 minutes. I've definitely had times where I dip below that. I've definitely had times where I dip above that. You're just going to try to figure out what makes sense for you. And as long as your sets aren't degrading or your strength isn't degrading in your workout and you're seeing progress, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great anecdotes and stories about people that do extended strength throughout an entire day. There's a really famous strength guy named Steve Justa that worked out at his farm, and he would just walk over and do a single deadlift occasionally during his workday. So sometimes it'd be 30 minutes, 40 minutes between sets, but he'd go over and he'd pick up this, barbell, or he made a lot of implements, but he'd go and he'd do a lift, and then go back to farming and whatnot, and then go do a lift. And you could do that throughout the day. The strength coach, Lee Brown, that used to work for us here at Elemental, when he was working toward his heavier and heavier deadlifts, he would take and spend 4 hours with this training session. But in between, he would like train clients, and he would go and he'd do stuff at his desk. But he would, do a few deadlifts here, a few deadlifts here, and so the time can be very protracted. But when if we're going back to pure strength, you don't really need that many sets. If you're doing 3 to 5 sets in a day, that's going to cover almost all of us. What else have we got here? Oh, here's a good one. I want to. Can you give us your top 3 supplements for climbing and why? Training specific, not necessarily for fueling while climbing. So I am not a big supplement guy. I feel like I guess I've just been in the game long enough, and I've been through enough cycles of getting psyched about a certain supplement that I'm starting to be of the perspective that if you are fueling correctly with normal food, you're probably about 99% of the way there. But where people use supplements is they try to shortcut other bad habits. Like they'll use, like a fat loss supplement and then still be drinking beer that night. They won't be sleeping adequately, and so they're using like a recovery supplement. There's nothing wrong with like a recovery drink, but food has been shown to actually do just as good a job of helping you recover. Some people are all about, the latest, greatest, this mineral, this specific amino acid. But I've just been through enough cycles, like I said, where, we were really psyched on chromium at one time, and then people were supplementing with coenzyme Q10. And then, ephedra was real big. And, so we've gone through a ton of these cycles. I just haven't seen anything that I think is really that much of a game changer. And it's not for lack of education. It's just that I've had enough perspective in that. I do think that supplementing with a protein can be useful to people because just getting that much protein in their food can be challenging throughout a day. I do think that a recovery supplement or drink is okay if you, again, don't take the time to prepare your food for that. But I do think also one of the major things that you can do to enhance your athleticism is to do a good job of meal planning and preparation. And so if you're doing that, you don't end up eating reactively or eating bad things. One of the greatest pieces of advice I've heard from a nutritionist in a long time is to eat at the crag the way that you would eat at home, rather than like a bunch of bars and processed foods and candy. You bring smaller versions of like, leftovers from last night and things like that. The big take home is that there's not going to be something that you can take that is going to be some kind of miracle for you. This will date me, but I remember when the Power Bar first came out, like original Power Bars came out, and we like got a box of them. And I remember I was with these other climbers, and we would open one and taste it. And we're just like waiting for something to happen, like, okay, here it comes, like, am I going to suddenly start bouldering better or something like that? And, the more that we know, the more we know that the changes from supplements are very, very minor, and they are at very, very best supplemental. If you're trying to use them as replacements for good nutrition, I think you're making a big mistake.
Yeah, and just to echo what Steve said, if you're not sleeping at say that 6 to 8 hour range, whatever recommendations out there, if you're not hungover and you're like actually eating well and you're like taking care of your body, yes, maybe you can start to dive into kind of that extra 1% or maybe even 0.5% of what the supplement's going to do for you. But you got to knock everything out of the park before you can maybe start to experiment with that. And like Steve said, a lot of athletes just have trouble getting enough protein on board for these massive training cycles to do that just through their diet. So the protein, whatever works with your gut and fits the bill, should work.
Brian just posted up a question about even collagen. There's a little bit of good research on collagen, and of course, it's being heavily promoted in the climbing community right now. But I'll say two things. One, the collagen supplements are a good source of protein, and so if you were to take that, you're at least getting a decent source of protein. But again, time will tell. It's probably not something that's going to hurt you, and that's the really important consideration there. Is like, are you going to take something that's going to cause physical harm? Collagen's probably not going to. Is there potential that it's just an expensive form of protein? Yeah, there's that too. But I would also just be careful about taking advice from people that are profiting from giving you that advice. And it's like, if you're going to ask, Adam Ondra what the best climbing shoe in the world is, you've got to remember that he's being paid thousands and thousands of dollars a year to tell you what his favorite climbing shoe is. And so we just need to continue to look at, for neutral advice, go look at the research rather than looking at advertising. And if you like what the research says, then I would say go ahead and go for that supplement. What else have we got?
Did you write one in there? I think that was all the listener questions that we had.
Oh, right. No, I had an email. I just got an email this morning. And I just answered this question. I did an interview earlier this week, and one of the things, there were a lot of questions about trying to change your body shape, body mass. One of the questions that came out and that keeps coming out is, how do I make my legs smaller? And, people look at themselves and they go, oh, okay, look, I look like this. I have wide hips, big thighs, whatever. I spent too much time mountain biking. I built up this leg mass. One of the things that people always seek out is, how can I change the basic morphology of my body? And that's actually quite hard to do. But one of the things that's interesting is that came out of road cycling is losing muscle mass during competition season. And what they do is they try to lose a lot of upper body mass because it's not that useful for cycling. And one of the methods of doing that is to massively reduce your protein intake and maintain or increase your training volume. And so when we maintain or increase training volume, we are asking our body for more and more protein. And by reducing the dietary protein, the thought is that your body begins to catabolize its own muscle in order to fuel that. And there's not a lot of science here. It's more like practical usage from cycling teams where they're like, yeah, here's how you do this protocol. But it's really fascinating to think of dropping your protein intake down to about 10% of your calories, and then increasing your training load. And what you see with these cyclists is they start to massively lose upper body mass. The problem with climbing is that we still do use our legs to walk around, to approach the crag, whatever else. And so you're probably not going to see those massive reductions in your leg mass. Now, the thing I would say is, yes, that might be a good thing to try to lose a little bit of mass there, but there's probably things you could do better if you're just trying to purely lose weight. One of the things is, like, how much junk do you climb with on your harness? How much clothing do you wear? I mean, I think that a lot of people, just by changing, the makeup of their clothing and whether they're carrying like a personal anchor system or whatever on their harness, they can lose some pretty valuable weight there. The other thing is, what's your fat mass like? And I know there's a whole bunch of, like taboo subjects around being too thin for climbing. But if you're over fat, you can probably lose some of that and climb better. And so those are going to be the things, and always technique is going to be more important than just trying to lose a pound or two in your legs. If you look at your total body mass and you have we can actually probably figure this out, and maybe I'll go ask the physiologist about this, but like trying to lose like an inch of girth in your thighs I don't even know how many pounds that might be. I mean, maybe it's 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds, but we'll find out some actual numbers on that. And there's probably better places where you can pull that 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds off.
Chris kind of asked this question as you were getting into this. And so I think what I'll add to maybe what Chris is asking, he said, hey guys, when do you recommend trying to lose weight within a training cycle? I think this is a pretty loaded question. Again, like Steve said, there's lots of taboo and really sensitive subjects for some people that really struggle with their either body image, body weight, whether it's overeating or not eating enough, and all those things. So people definitely need to recognize like where they are in the spectrum. But like if we're talking about losing weight for a training cycle, within your normal body weight range, like if you've gotten to a point where you need to lose 30, 40, 50 pounds, you need to consider losing that to get back to your fighting weight and then trying to maintain that as much as possible. But if we're talking about just like that kind of fluctuation of like 5 to maybe up to 10 pounds or 12 pounds, I think being smart about, at least for where we live in Wyoming, we have, long winters and pretty long summers. And I think where people can really mess up here is they try to keep their summer weight throughout the whole winter. And it's just really hard to do. I'm not saying you just like let it go, but like you're not outside as much because the sun goes down sooner. It comes up a little later. Like you're just not as active. The crags that we have access to are only like a 15-minute approach rather than like a 45 or an hour-minute approach. So like you're just moving less. And so if you like kind of pack on a little bit of extra weight, like say 3, 4, 5 pounds, it just makes sense. It's kind of like what we're all feeling maybe a little bit in this self-isolation. We're just not moving as much as we normally do. Like our overall work is less, or we're having to really consciously keep it at the old level. But I think in training cycles, if you are in a pure strength phase, it actually serves you to like pack on a little bit of weight to like move a little bit more weight around. And then you can start to like taper into like some sort of performance cycle or some goal route where maybe you're keeping track of your intake as far as calories, what you're doing for your overall capacity or fitness level, moving a little bit more, and kind of shedding down to the weight that you want to be for your goal of sending whatever route that is. But we definitely don't want to see any massive up and downs and gains like you might see like on a bodybuilder or something like that. So just figuring out where the weight feels like light for you, where you're like, oh man, I really feel light today on the wall. Figure out what it also feels good, like energy level wise and training wise, and the numbers feel good. Then you can start to fluctuate with your season, with your cycle, so on and so forth. But it's going to be hard to like cut weight during a strength phase, and it's going to be hard to like keep a lot of muscle mass and weight when you're kind of doing like the performance endurance phase. So thinking about that.
Yeah, one of the great pieces of advice that I've heard is that you should try to lose weight at the same rate that you gained it. And this is an interesting thing because people are just like, I am going on a diet and I'm going to lose all of this weight right now. And that is super challenging for people. And I think that if you go, oh, it took me 4 months to get this fat, it'll take 4 months to drop it. And you're going to be in a lot better health at that point. One of the things is when we start dropping weight, it competes with our ability to recover from exercise. And so you need to be quite careful with that. And if you do drop weight too fast, we almost automatically dump into some sort of injury overtraining cycle. And that becomes really hard to get out of. And so I would just be super conservative and say like, okay, I gained 8 pounds over the winter from October to January, give yourself, another 3-4 months to take that 8 pounds off. And it should happen pretty easily. Just keep making sure you've got that protein intake up and dropped out the cookie calories, and you should be okay.
I think I understand Scott's question. We'll get to it real quick before we have to leave. How do I know the proper balance of reps versus adding weight? And so I think what Scott's asking here is like, say he's doing some strength lift, like say a bench press. How do I know when to add load or should I add reps? And kind of our general rule of thumb here is, especially if it's a lift that's new or it's a new training cycle or you haven't taken it very far, add reps, so add volume before adding load. And so if you're like doing a 3x3 kind of standard strength protocol, maybe you're adding a rep each session or each session in the week. So maybe you get up to 6 or 7 reps, and then you can go back down to 3 reps and then add 5 pounds or 10 pounds. You'll kind of find out what makes sense for you, but increasing the volume by about 20%. And then once you own that, you can add intensity. And it's the same way gaining or amassing strength or going through a strength protocol is a lot like losing or gaining weight. The slower you build, the longer it lasts. You can definitely add load your next session and it will like automatically feel stronger because you've lifted more weight, but it's not going to last as long and you're going to hit that ceiling much sooner. And it's the same thing. Like we see people do these incredible things where they'll lose lots and lots of weight very quickly. It just comes back super quick.
Yeah, so we're getting close on our time here. This is good news for us. Maybe, hopefully it's really great news. We'll be reopening the gym on May 18th, which is really exciting for us. We've been working hard to get everything clean, get our protocols going. We've got this new air filtration system coming in. We've got a whole new cleaning protocol. And so Charlie and I are moving from being strength coaches to being janitors, is basically what it's looking like.
Before I started.
Yeah. But what we're doing is we are ramping back up to be working. And so we're going to pull back on our Facebook Live. And we're not going to do another one again until June 2nd. So that's like 3 weeks from now. Because we're ramping back up into more time at the gym, trying to get things lined out and things there. So if you've got questions, do get in touch with us. But understand that we won't be having them for the next couple of weeks. The next one is this same time, noon Tuesday on June 2nd.
Yeah, this is hopefully good news for everyone. I mean, we're slowly trying to figure out what this post-COVID-19 world is going to look like and being safe and keeping our community safe in these gyms. But hopefully everyone's able to socially distance themselves outside a little bit more, get into the places we want to get back into. And yeah, we'll be thinking of all you. Yeah, definitely send your questions in. It actually might be kind of nice, depending on how robust it is. Maybe we'll push past a little past 30 minutes, but it will kind of give us some time to get a nice queue of questions going.
Hey, John Burkhart just had one quick question. He was asking about the air filtration. The thing we're looking at is called Air Fix. It's Air PHX. And it's like a clinical air filtration system. And it's not about like cleaning chalk out of the air or anything like that. It's purely the idea is to clean, of course, viral stuff from the air. And so we're looking at implementing that system. It's somewhat expensive, but it's definitely making us feel better about being open again, because like all of us are kind of on a little bit of a high alert about these things. And so John, just email me and I can get you the details, and we can talk about what's appropriate for you guys and whatnot. So,
well, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your week. Keep training. Stay the course.